We are recording this. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our opening reception of Paris Impossible. I am Abigail Ogilvy. I own Abigail Ogilvy Gallery in Boston, Massachusetts. We're a contemporary art gallery, and obviously due to COVID-19, we're closed right now. So this is our workaround to trying out some new things. I think we were already planning to kind of recalibrate given that everything's moving online. But an interesting phrase that was said last week on an Art Basel webinar was something David Zwirner said. And he said, galleries are meant to bring culture to the world. And that was something that really resonated with me because obviously we can't do that with the gallery closed. So we're hoping that we can bring a little culture to your home today. This is recorded and you can ask questions in the Q&A and also through the chat. So Michel, we'd love to hear from you. Who are you? Where are you?
All right, I'm a painter. I'm based in Western Massachusetts. I'm in Montague, Massachusetts. I work in oil paint. I do paintings of blurred photographs that I've taken on my travels. And I'm basically converting photographs into oil paintings, sort of roughly using the shapes of the blurs as brushstrokes. And I've been working on this show for a year and a half now, something like that. So I'm really excited. It's all come together.
Yeah, so it's a really exciting new body of work. And I think something fun to start off with before we dive into the show, Michel, is a question we always get we get it both from artists and from collectors, is how do you find your artist or how do you meet your artist? So I think our story is fun, how we met, although I would love to hear it from your point of view, because
Okay, from my point of view, it's really interesting because traveling, specifically walking around places on foot, is what informs my work, is what inspires me. And it also happens to be how I found you, or sort of we found each other. I was in Boston, spending the day on foot, looking at galleries, kind of getting a sense for something that might fit my work. And it was late in the day. We came into your gallery and you were there. And even it was like almost like closing time. People were literally locking up. And you were so warm and welcoming. And you just were businesslike. You got right down to it. Said, sure, let's look at the work. Pull out your laptop. No pressure. And there was a moment you were looking at one of the images and you sort of paused. And I thought, well, either she likes it or it's so bad it made her pause. So you liked it.
yeah.
And I liked your gallery. I mean, I knew about it from beforehand and was following you. There was a visual thread. It's really hard. I guess it's really hard for a visual artist to put these things into words, right? That's why we paint or make things. But there was like this visual thread, like my work fit in with the melody that the works you were creating, and that's the best way I can put it. So it just felt amazing. I felt amazingly lucky.
I think it was.
I got an email from you like a few weeks later, and you wanted to see more work, and you invited me to the gallery to come and meet people. And I was on that day, it was the end of the day. I've been having a crazy day at work. We were moving like an entire science center from one building to another. And so I'd been spending the day like in a hard hat and like steel-toed boots.
This is all new information.
It was crazy. So I was like walking out through the hallway. And I got this email from you, and I was so happy. I realized afterwards I was actually crying with happiness.
Oh. Yeah, I think it was one of those. I mean, I think there's a lot in life that's, a combination of hard work and then good timing and good luck. And so I think it was a day where, maybe I was less busy, and so had a lot of time to chat. It was nice meeting you and your wife. I mean, we end up becoming very close with our artists, so there was something to almost having a peek into your personal life, kind of right out of the gates was really nice for me. And then seeing the work, it was beautiful online and then even more stunning in person. So hopefully everyone watching will eventually see it in person if you haven't already. And then something that I think was a reason it fit for our gallery is we do focus quite a bit on painting. We show all sorts of media as well, light installation, photography, and so on. But Michel's process really drew me in. So he has a really interesting process. There was so much to say about the work. These aren't just landscape paintings and it ends there. There's so much heart that goes into them. So I would love for you to start off telling everyone a little bit more about that process.
Sure. So the process, as I mentioned in the beginning, starts with traveling. And for me, that's a really important aspect of the work. And when you're traveling, you're seeing things with fresh eyes. Everything you see, you sort of accept at its face value. And that awareness, that sort of trust you bring to that experience is something that I tap into for the images that I'm using for the show. So Abigail's bringing up some of the images now, and I just want to mention the images you're able to see now and the one behind me. The colors are different, so you should definitely look at the website to get the full experience. It's hard to transfer these things over the internet. So I'll be, traveling. Most people are sort of laying, enjoying their surroundings. I've got my camera, out, and I'm working in these times that are, that give us this feeling of relaxation or wonder or movement through a city. Those are things I'm really interested in right now. And I'll be trying to record those, the different elements of them. So looking into spaces, maybe not pictures of monuments, but near them. Life going on in and around these places that are so well known. The ones in this series happen to be places that are really important to me: Paris, New York City, and there's one from the Caribbean, and they're places that I've traveled to repeatedly in my life or lived in. But it can also be somewhere totally new. And so I'll collect all these photographs, and they're not in focus. So I'm taking blurred pictures, which, if you want to go back and sort of relive a moment, it can be very frustrating as a photograph in some ways, but it also captures only just enough of that scene to sort of spark that memory. And I get kind of obsessed about the physical photograph. So I'll look through all these images, I'll print out maybe 100 or so, I'll take a few thousand pictures on a trip, and then work through them. And I'm looking for ones that have, certain qualities. The blacks are, the darkest parts are black, the lightest parts are nice white. They've got sparkles of intense color set against a more general background, all these sort of visual cues and elements. And it also has to tie into that memory of having been there and taking the photograph. So the elements have, when I look at the photograph, it has to spark that energy from being there, and it kind of is more than just the photograph itself. It's more than just a piece of paper with a pretty image on it. It's got to have a depth and something that you can mine, something you can sort of dig into and get more out of. It's kind of like each one's like this well, like a key, and you put this trust into it when you select that photograph and sort of mine it, and this is what I get out of it. That process is long, so I'll take photos, they'll sit for months. Hemingway used to write a story and leave it for at least a year in his desk drawer before he'd even reread it for submission. And I'd like to do something like that. It's not always possible, and you get really, but it's important to have that distance, I think, to kind of reassess things. And then the painting process can take anywhere from 10 days to a few months, depending on the size of the piece and the complexity. I think the Jardin 3 took a couple months to do. That one was a lot more complex than some of the others I've done in the past. And yeah, then that's sort of the process. There is one that stands out a little bit. And
so do you want to talk a little bit? So the show is called Paris Impossible, and that's titled after one of your paintings, the one that's behind you, and I can also pull it up on the screen share as well. What was interesting to me about the title Paris Impossible in this moment is something it means to me is it's impossible to go to Paris right now, right? Like it's impossible to travel. So there's some level of impossibility there. Granted, this piece was done, last fall, last winter. So this was before this era. So it's interesting how it kind of transcends time in that way. So yeah, tell us more about that piece.
So the Paris Impossible piece, which you should definitely look at on the website because the colors are muted here. It's basically a combination of images. So a direction that I'm excited about going in right now is a little bit more abstract. So using more than one source image. So these are, I think it's a cafe in Montmartre and then some street scenes, a couple of street scenes from central Paris, and they're woven together, you know, upside down, right side up, different pieces in different places, and sort of the idea is it gives a sense of a place without too many details that your eye can interpret directly. So I'm fascinated with this idea of memory and the keys that ignite memory, but also wanting to push further into the picture plane beyond a recognizable time and place, maybe combining a few to give us a bigger sense of an entire area. So it's an experiment, and I'm pretty happy with it. And I'm really thrilled that Abigail sort of liked it so much, and it's you know also got this other meaning now, and you know we can't travel to Paris, so it is Paris Impossible. And at the time, you know, for me, it was Paris Impossible. The title came from the fact that it was an impossible image. It was something that I was creating from these memories into something entirely new, in a new way for me. But now it's like, you know, if you're outside of Paris, you can't go there. If you're in Paris, you can't leave. And I don't know, it's
well, I'd be interested to hear, I know this answer and it's also in our press release if you've read it, but you know, just to hear from you, why is Paris so important to you? I mean, what does that place mean to you? I mean, you don't live there, you live in Western Massachusetts. So, you know, what is this series of paintings of Paris even all about?
So they're basically rooted, you know, my wife and I lived in London for many years, and we had our first two children there. And we would travel to Paris, and one of our trips was right before our first child was born. And most recently we went a couple of years ago, I guess in the fall. And this was also right before the Notre Dame burned, and right before the riots started, actually. It was like a few weeks before riots started. And so for me, these images captured a time before. And, you know, the memories became even more poignant in you know, because of that fact. And now everyone's in a scenario where there's before, you know, COVID and after COVID, and our memories of these places and times and people and events that we are remembering are totally colored by that and framed by it now. So the work in this show has taken on a new dimension too. And, you know, when I look at scenes full of people in a park, you don't know when or what shape that will have in the future for people. Yeah, Paris was really important to us personally. We traveled there, and we would walk across the city on foot. We'd explore it, you know, poke into places. This painting Abigail's brought up from the Jardin du Luxembourg. That's a beautiful spot that late in the day we wandered into after crossing Paris. I think we started, you know, like near the Eiffel Tower and just walked around, you know, and we aren't guided by landmarks necessarily, but more like fate. And I really believe in that, being susceptible to fate in these excursions and just letting it carry you through the spaces. And in this day, fate gave us this. It was an autumn day, an afternoon, the low light coming through the trees and coloring everything. And everywhere I looked, it was just beautiful. And so, I took tons of pictures. This one stood out to me because it has this really nice three-dimensionality, and the trees sort of expanding overhead. The painting took on this mosaic quality in the trees that I'd never experienced before, and I really like. And the people were just lounging in chairs, relaxing in their own places, in their own worlds. And, now I think about it as like a metaphor for where we all are now. We're all in a garden, our home, some setting, and we're all, reflecting on things, on our life, taking stock of things. And here's another one. This is from the Jardin series as well. And that experience of solitude.
Well, and there's I think something that I find so interesting, having shown the work in the gallery in person, is watching people's reactions to the work. And there is that sense, like you've spoken about, you create the work and you put it out there and you know where it is and the photo, the source photo. You do title them so people can kind of guess where they are. Obviously, if they're titled related to Paris, it's probably somewhere in Paris. But there's that level of mystery, but then it really draws people in. I mean, we see people with the people that have maybe eventually purchased them or just love looking at them. They feel really drawn to the work because there's that sense of place that's just being hinted at, and then they can kind of make up the rest of it. I mean, I think for me personally, looking at this piece in particular, now that I know that those are probably people below the trees leaned, that's now what I see. But when I was making it up with my own eye, I was seeing maybe stone wall or, different things that aren't exactly what he was rendering, but I was creating my own place in the painting. And I think that's a really exciting part of the work.
Yeah, I think that's, it's important to note that people do, they complete the painting themselves. So in art, that happens all the time, right? You complete the experience. It's only complete when someone's viewed it or experienced it. And I think that's true across, all mediums of art. And in these paintings, my hope is that people, what they bring to it, completes it, and it's an individual experience for them. So I think that's a cool idea. There's this Diane Arbus quote about a photograph being a secret about a secret. It's giving you a lot of detail, but the more it gives you, the more you want to know, and the more you realize you don't know. And a blurred photograph is almost like sharing a secret. It's like saying, hey, yeah, remember this? And it's just giving you a little bit enough that you can fill in the rest. And there's, sometimes people have an experience of, I was there. I remember that. I was there then, which I think is fascinating. It's such a powerful tool. Our minds can complete things and populate them. And I'm really thrilled that the paintings can generate this experience for people.
Totally, yeah. And thinking about, so this series is obviously based in Paris, but I'd love for you to tell the audience, are there other places that are really important to you or parts of your past that are incorporated into the work in some degree?
Yeah, I mean, so in this show, there's Paris, there's New York City, there's a few taken from the High Line. And that was a trip my wife and I did before the birth of our youngest child. We have 4 kids. I keep relating painting because travel to children, but yeah, 4 kids, so it spans quite a distance of time. So it was a wonderful, romantic exploration of New York City, and it was just a perfect setting for the photographs. And for me, it really captured the essence of being there. Something about the light in those paintings just solidified it for me. So I've been tapping into that for a series of New York work. We had lived in New York City when we were first couple, right out of college. And it was, a little different than visiting and staying in Greenwich Village in a nice hotel. We were living on the upper West Side, renting a room from a Chinese family. I think one month we paid them, I sanded a floor in one of their rooms with a hand flush, like a hand sander. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. But these things, they bring back those memories for me. They have that richness. And I'm really hopeful they do similar things for other people. They place themselves in the painting, and it brings back that well of memory, and it's a good one. And there's one shot from the Caribbean, or one painting from the Caribbean, and that's a picture of an old derelict boat on a beach, and my kids would climb on it, and when you visit in the winter, a couple of years in a row, this is off of Vieques Island in Puerto Rico, and they would climb on and explore, probably pretty dangerous, a lot of rusty pieces, and then a few years later, after Hurricane Maria, the pieces of the boat were strewn on the beach, and they had sort of identified them, and oh yeah, look, it's there's the tiller, or there's the piece of the keel or something. So that has nice memories for me as well.
And then growing up, you grew up in rural New Hampshire, is that correct?
Yeah. So
that's certainly an aspect of the work that this was something that I find so interesting about these talks, and that I doubt at a gallery opening we'd get into these layers of detail about your background and who you are and how it impacts the work. And I just love this story. So can you tell me?
So it's a good, my obsession with travel and feeling like a fish out of water, and that sort of stimulating that experience of noticing things, I think it's rooted in my childhood. So I grew up one of 3 kids, and I was raised by parents who were sort of back to the land, 70s hippies. They're good hippies, in a good way, but it was, and they're wonderful people. But as a kid, I was being raised in kind of like a third world environment. We lived in a sort of a stilt house in like a Thai inspired style. We had no running water. We had no electricity. We carried, firewood. We cut ourselves. Everything we had. We lived basically on a mountain, so we had to carry stuff up the driveway in the winter. And when we could drive up, we brought it up. An old beat up Land Rover. So yeah, this is my existence. And then, I go to school with my friends who, grew up on farms in the area, or, had a more sort of normal life. And it was like traveling. It was like going from one century to another, or one world to another, one country to another. So I think for me, travel sort of, reawakens that. And that's what I grew up with. And as a child, what you live with is normal. You just accept it at face value. So it's a way of, tapping into that way of being, which is something I got used to. And I'm glad now. It was really awkward, especially as a teenager, when you want to shower every day. You've got to heat water in the stove and put it in this plastic bag with a hose with a nozzle on the end, and sit in a kiddie pool and wash your hair. So, that was hard. But now looking back, I'm really, I'm so grateful for them for giving me that experience as a child. Yeah.
But I think that's an interesting tidbit, in that maybe not everyone has that shared experience with you, but there is the shared experience of feeling like some place is so new that you've traveled, between centuries, or just somewhere totally new to another planet, but maybe you're just really at the next town over. And that feeling of not knowing, where you are, what's happening, kind of trying to fit in, and then having that translate into the work and the travel. I mean, everyone's been there before. So I think that's a really unique and interesting part of the work. I would want to ask though, so now that you're at home and sheltering in place in Montauk, Massachusetts, and not traveling, what are you working on now?
So I'm working on a few different things. I'm still painting. I have source photos that they could potentially last the rest of my life. um, I might get bored of them, but so I can keep working and producing in the studio, which has been fantastic. I've had more time to do that. I have a day job, so I haven't been able to do as much of that, and so I've been painting a lot more. I taught myself how to repair a slate roof, which is an interesting, fun experience, I think. We have 4 kids, so they're 4, 6, 12, and 14. And so we've been sort of managing homeschooling for them, putting in a big vegetable garden. Busy, very busy, but very grateful. It's been a really good time to just appreciate what we have and what's important to us. And so, yeah, but busy.
That's a busy schedule. A lot to take on, but I'm sure it's great that you have access to your studio, and it's a home studio, so you can still find time to paint. And you have been painting quite a bit. You've been sending me new images.
Yeah, no, the painting part's great. The home studio is wonderful. A few months ago, I was really feeling, I really need a studio. I can get away from the house and go. And now this is, just what we need. So I feel, really, really blessed to have that.
So you don't have a whole lot of free time. My next question was, what do you do in your free time? But fix up the house, take care of the kids.
I think that also goes back to childhood. We were all helping. We were carrying water or firewood or stacking wood, or we always had something to do. There was always a job. And I think teaching children to enjoy work at an early age is a good thing. Even washing the dishes, something. And so my natural default is working. Is either painting or doing things, making things, growing them.
Yeah, I think we recently received a selfie of you on top of your house doing that slate roof or something or other. You had missed a meeting and had to send proof of the excuse. So.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was sending that to the whole list of the email.
No, that was a lot of fun. All of our artists fortunately know each other quite well. And I remember last summer we would have all been together. We did a big family and friends get together last June, and all 4 of your kids were there. I think they ate all of the sushi that we had bought.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they ate that fast. And I think that was around your 15-year anniversary. So kind of when this series was kicking off and the travel was kicking off. So it's interesting to see kind of where we were then and where we are now. So we have some questions that have come in through the Q&A. Someone wants to know, do you have any studio rituals or things that you do in the studio?
Oh yeah, I totally depend on ritual because, maybe it's connected with memory. I'm obsessed with it in my work, but for myself, I can remember nothing. I need these photos to do it for me. So, when I walk into the studio, I need to have, the paint laid out, everything ready to go, brushes organized, clean. I always work in the same orientation, in the studio. I have a nice north window that's lighting this talk. So I have all those things worked out beforehand. And then the only questions I'll be working on are, to do the image, to do the placement of color and brush strokes. And I need that simplicity. I need it broken down so that I'm just focused on, where I'm working in the picture. If I have to worry about all the other stuff too, it's not going to happen. So I'm very fastidious in terms of ritual. I'm not superstitious. I don't have that kind of ritual, but I need things to be orderly to make it happen.
And then someone else kind of piggybacking off of that, and they must be maybe an artist as well, so know the kind of crazy schedule that you can have, and then carving out that time for doing your work. They want to know, how much time do you set aside to do work in a day, in a week, or is there some sort of schedule that you hold?
Yeah, so we have a pretty tight schedule. I wouldn't say it's military, but it's like pretty strict, especially now. So we have, the older kids doing school, the younger kids doing school. My wife and I both work. I'm in the studio, and we have, big old farmhouse we're sort of renovating and living in. Um, and then there's cooking meals and all the other things. So uh, we have a pretty set schedule. We just take turns doing meal preparation, looking after kids. The older kids have been helping with the younger ones. Um, in turn, they get to stay up a little later with us, maybe watch a movie or something. It's all
So how long
give
are you
and
in the
take.
studio though? What's the studio time like? I mean, is it an
Studio
hour?
time is like, I'll get, before the COVID, I would work all the weekend. So just flat out on the weekend, and then 2 mornings a week. I would take off of my day job and come in and work. So flat out, maybe 4 or 5 hours. And so, I was getting 25 hours a week. Now it's probably about the same because weekends sort of don't exist anymore for us. So every day is sort of, we just wake up and go through the same motions. And I'm guessing I get about 3 hours of work in, average in a day. So right now, in terms of art making, it's a good situation for me. But at some point, my work's going to pick up again, my day job, and we'll have to reassess.
So I'm gonna, for the next question, I'm gonna pull up some of your work so that we can be looking at, let's say, this piece while we talk it through. So actually, one of our newer artists we're working with, Susan Murray, asked the question, how do you choose your color palette? Is it strictly based on the photos, or, are you thinking outside the box at all?
That's a good question. I have a pretty simple go-to palette, and I've found over the years that it reflects, I think, probably the inks that are used in the photo printing process. And so these sort of oracles that I'm getting the inspiration from. So I don't often adjust things. I will go in and sometimes I'll erase a figure or I'll recreate something. But usually I'm trusting this process. It's almost like a mathematical function or algorithm in my brain. So I'm seeing, the photograph, and I'm making the painting, and it just happens. And the palette comes from that process. So yeah, it's basically derived from the photographs.
And so then someone else asked, and I'll give a little more background. So if you go on a trip and you take all these photos, and here we have this body of work that's around, let's say, 8 photos, I don't know off the top, or 8 artworks. How did you choose the photos that would become the artwork? Is there some sort of special emotional connection, or is it aesthetic? How does that ultimately happen?
So it's complex. I mean, I would say initially, I'd shortlist images that aesthetically grab me, that I think, wow, that's got some power to it. But it has to have something else, and it can't be just a simply pleasing image, or obviously something you immediately recognize. It's got to have some questions in it, and one of the reasons it's hard for artists to talk about their work is each artwork is like a question. It's like it's not a statement, at least the way I approach it. And so yeah, they have an aesthetic quality, but also they have to elicit some kind of emotional response from me, so that I will be willing to spend hours and hours digging into its intricacies. It takes a long time to do what I do, and it has to be important in a deeper way. And maybe I don't know enough about, I'm not sure. And in the process of painting it, I'll realize, oh yeah, I remember this or that. Okay, that person or that tree or whatever. It's got to be something that catches me on a gut level, and it's pretty hard to define that.
Well, I think it's effective because I think people have a really strong reaction to the work, and you've chosen wisely. We have a question in the Q&A from Robert. So some of your work has a stained glass feel. Are you conscious of that as you're making?
Yeah, I only really clued into that in the last few months, and specifically the Jardin painting with the trees, and actually both the most recent paintings are through the trees, so the light coming through the trees. Yeah, I can see it here, and again, like, go to the website and look at the images there, but the the light coming through and the brush strokes and the way the blur, it translated into the brush strokes naturally for me. And then afterwards, looking at it, I had this feeling, oh, there's these dark areas and they're like, the lead, and the light areas are like the glass. I think that's a really cool effect. And, if I had a team working under me and infinite resources, it'd be fascinating to try and make something, with actual, glass, using one of these as a sort of an inspiration. But for better or worse, I'm totally obsessed with oil paint. And I think that I can never see that changing, really. It's a love affair. So, but I am aware of it, yeah.
And then a question specifically about the art community in Montauk. What's the art community like there? It seems like there's many artists in the valley.
Yeah, Montague.
Montague, that's how you say it?
Yeah.
All right.
And like all old British words, it's really hard to pronounce. And Montague is a really beautiful little town in Western Mass. And it's part of the sort of the Happy Valley, it's called. And there's a really vibrant art scene here. It's wonderful. It's one of the reasons we decided to settle down here. There's a bunch of universities, there's big university galleries, and there's an active scene. Northampton is a hub. It's probably Western Massachusetts, Western New England hub of art. And there's a lot to see. I highly recommend visiting if you haven't been here before, and going to the venues when we can be able to do that again. But yeah, it's a really great place to live as an artist. I prefer to live in the countryside and visit cities to see shows or get inspired. But particularly once we had children, we decided this was a better setting to be in.
Absolutely. I think that is all of the questions we have. So is there anything else you want to add, Michel, or?
I want to thank you, Abigail.
This is so much fun. I'm so glad we did this. No, we want to thank everyone who joined. We loved your questions. We loved having you on. This is recorded, so we will be uploading it, I think, to YouTube and sharing it afterwards and putting it on the website page so you can refer to it later, share it with your friends who missed out. We have gotten some emails from people saying they'll watch it later on, so that is going to be available. But thank you so much for making our first virtual opening reception possible. Very fun, and I think we pulled it off, Michel. Yay. All right. Well, so you can visit us at abigailogilvy.com to find the artworks and our contact information. And we hope to see you in person eventually when all this ends, and have a great rest of your week and long weekend ahead. Bye, everyone.
Bye.